and it'll be 5 feet from the rear property line. This shed meets the design guidelines as it's placed behind the rear of the property, behind the primary structure, and is minimally visible from the street. And then at 220 East Quincy Avenue in Oakwood Lincoln Park, the applicant is rehabbing the existing porch within the existing footprint and roof line. They are removing some non-historic wrought iron columns and replacing them with 6 4x4 wood posts with decorative molding at the top and the bottom, and installing wood paneling at the true ceiling height. And that is it.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we're going to move on to the certificate of appropriateness. First one for infill is 1534 Texas Avenue, and that is parcel ID 81PE003, and this is for a new primary structure. 8B23IH.
Okay, so this is a new primary residence fronting Texas Avenue. You can see the site plan on the left and the lot image from Google Street View on the right. It's a 1-story residence with a front gable roof, 5/12 pitch, an exterior vinyl lap siding, 1/1 double hung windows, and a concrete foundation. The house measures 30 feet wide by 50 feet long, as you can see on the site plan here. It'll be set back 21.5 feet from the front property line, and the parking is proposed as a 12-foot wide driveway on the side of the house accessed via Texas Avenue. I'll go through some of the comments. Overall, the house is proposed to be set 21.5 feet from the front property line. The 8-foot deep front porch is recessed below the primary roof line. The average front setback of this block is 22.7 feet. There are 3 houses that are located further east on the block. You can see those going down Texas Avenue there. This one is adjacent to a surface parking lot for the nearby sports field. The front setback pattern will maintain a consistent streetscape on the block, and it is set, it has a substantial right setback due to a buffer zone for a blue line stream that occurs through that property. The parking meets the infill housing guidelines for properties without alleys. It's at least 20 feet behind the front facade of the infill house, with access limited to 1 lane between the street and the front facade. There may be final revisions to the site plan necessary to meet city engineering standards. There is a comment in number 4 identifying that the foundation height should be confirmed to be compatible with the neighborhood. The applicant has clarified that it will be a 12-inch, like a 1-foot foundation height. They also have visitability requirements from the city of Knoxville, so they are required to provide a 0-step entry to the foundation. So they won't be able to increase the foundation height above that, which has been addressed. Overall, the design includes sufficient windows on the facade and side elevations. Typically, the infill housing reviews discourage shutters that are inappropriately sized for the windows. If the shutters are installed on the facade, they should reflect the size and proportion of the windows. The proposed 5/12 pitch roof should be revised to be at least a 6/12 pitch, which is the minimum typically approved in the infill housing overlay. So staff's recommending approval of certificate 8B23IH, subject to the following conditions: that the final site plan meet city engineering standards, the roof pitch be increased to a 6/12 minimum, and then the revision to that final condition there, the foundation be clad in stucco. It will remain as a 12-inch foundation to meet visitability requirements.
Thank you for that. I should have noted before that Michael Haynes is the applicant, and he's with Michael Haynes Construction. Is there anyone to represent the applicant?
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Michael Haynes.
Do you have anything to add to Lindsay's?
No, on the design, can I do a 7/12 on the roof pitch?
Yeah, the recommendation would just be the minimum that this board typically approves is a 6/12. So
Let's do a 6.
if a 7/12 is preferable for your construction methods, that's totally
That's fine. Just whatever y'all need me to do. So I can do a 6 or a 7, just whatever y'all prefer, really.
Is there anyone here that opposes the project? Okay, I'll open it up to the rest of the board for discussion.
Could you Could you bring the elevations back, please? Thank you.
Well, I would move to accept it per staff recommendations. My only comment would be, if we're going real craftsman, you wouldn't have shutters on it. But I don't know that I object to them on this one either. I could leave
Just
that.
do no shutters.
Could leave that optional to
Okay,
to
that's
you,
fine.
but,
I can take them off.
Otherwise, just I would move to accept per staff recommendation.
And you want the 22.7 setback also?
Yes, whatever they have designated and whatever engineering works out.
Okay.
Next to that blue line, who knows where they may push you around a little more.
Okay.
Sorry, Perry, is the, right here, is the, removal of the shutters from the plan, is that something that you would like to make into your motion, or is it optional?
I think optional.
Optional, okay.
Okay.
Just want to make sure.
Client may want them. I don't have a strong opinion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay. So, thank you.
That's it. Thank you all.
Next up, we have, let's see, file number 8C23IH, and that is 1719 Texas Avenue. Applicant is Mike Bollinger from Rock Creek Construction. Do you have anything? Oh, you're going to do stuff first.
Yep. Okay, I'll run through these. So 8C23IH and 8D23IH are identical currently as proposed. So these will require 2 votes, which I'll put up the 2 staff recommendations as we get there, but I'm going to run through the description and the staff recommendation, or the description and the comments just once to conserve our time here. So 8C23IH, this is 1719 Texas Avenue. You can see that called out here on the right. And then 8D23IH is on the left. That's 1723 Texas Avenue, so that'll be next. This is a new primary residence fronting Texas Avenue. It's a 1-story house that's 25 feet wide by 50 feet long. There's a front gable roof with an 8/12 pitch and a centrally located front porch that projects 8 feet that also has an 8/12 pitch front gable roof. The house will be clad in a vinyl lap siding and feature 6 6/6 double hung windows and 1 smaller 4/4 double hung window. The house is proposed to be set 25 feet from the front property line on a concrete foundation. The parking is proposed as a concrete parking pad located behind the house and accessed via the alley. So again, this house is identical to the proposed new construction at 1723 Texas Avenue. The edge of the front porch is proposed to be set 25 feet from the front property line. The average front setback of the block is 24.5 feet. And that's also measuring to full-length front porches on the adjacent houses. This new house will maintain a consistent streetscape pattern with the houses on the block. The proposed parking meets the infill housing design guidelines as it's accessed from the alley and located to the rear of the house. Final revisions may be necessary to meet city engineering standards. In terms of doors and windows, the guidelines recommend that door and window styles be similar with similar proportions and ratio of solid to void to historic houses on the block. The proportions of the windows and door on the facade meet the design guidelines, but revisions are necessary to the side elevation window placement to avoid large swaths of siding with no transparency. This house is proposed to be identical to the adjacent new construction house at 1723 Texas Avenue. Revisions should be made to one of the 2 houses to introduce differentiation in design. Options include revised roof lines, porch design and placement, or house massing. So staff's recommending approval of 8C23IH subject to the conditions that the final site plan meets city engineering standards, the foundation reflect foundation height of existing houses on block and be clad in stucco. The final siding materials to meet the infill housing design guidelines, the revision of placement of the side elevation windows with approval by staff, and then revisions to differentiate from the adjacent new house at 1723 Texas Ave with approval by staff.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does the applicant want to say anything?
No, are we talking about both or just one? No, I did, which side are you wanting an extra window on?
Can you say your name and your
Oh,
address,
sorry,
please?
Mike Ballinger, Rock Creek Construction,
And your address?
2916 Brabson Drive.
Thank you. The window?
I can clarify on the staff comment on the window. There wasn't necessarily a specific recommendation on how and where the side elevation window placement would be revised. It's just revisions may be necessary to avoid large swaths of siding with no transparency. So the recommendation would be that you revise those and with approval by staff. So that means that you have the opportunity to look at your floor plan and how that affects the elevation drawings, and you can submit that on the back end.
Oh, okay. But you don't know whether it's the left or right?
You don't necessarily have to identify that now. Well, I'd defer to the board for
Okay.
input on that.
Okay. Is there anyone here opposed? Okay. Then we'll open it up to the board for discussion.
Did you submit a floor plan with it?
What's that?
Did you submit a floor plan with your submission?
Yes.
Do we have that on the screen? Yeah, so as far as adding windows, it would, like in the bedrooms, on the plan west, bottom left bedroom, you could add a window to the left wall and maybe a window to the, what's the upper left? Another bedroom. So I mean, I think something like that would be able to break up the large swath of
Yeah.
of siding, as well as one comment I would say is also the placement of the rear elevation window that's essentially just on the corner, centering that in the room, would just give some more proportion and to the facade. So does that make sense enough? Is just being able to add transparency to those spaces to be able to break up 10
Yeah,
and
if it's-
12-foot runs of siding.
If it's that side, I would say let's do it in that back bedroom because the front bedroom's a little smaller. If we could put one, just behind bedroom 2 wall there, in that back bedroom, would that work to break up
I
that?
think it'd be more, if you're saying back bedroom, it'd be actually on the left wall. Would be
Right.
where there'd be an addition, and then the window to the north would just, I think, this is just a separate discussion, I think in elevation would wants to scoot over to be centered on the room.
Closer to the back door there.
Correct, because it's
Yeah.
basically probably in between the edge of the wall and the door, just because it seems haphazard how it's located on the corner at the moment.
Yeah, we could do that. I don't think anybody would be putting a bed against that wall anyway.
I think adding the one window might be appropriate instead of two, just because it's only 50 feet, the entire depth of the house. So 4 windows might be nice, but it'd be a lot for 50 feet.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve based on staff recommendation.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Rick and a second from Cameron to approve based on staff recommendation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, ayes have it. Thank you.
Do we need to have a separate motion on the second lot?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. That was for the first one.
Yeah.
Do we have any discussion on the second one?
Just for the record, I'll say this is 8D23IH. It's 1723 Texas Avenue. And the staff recommendation here is staff recommends approval of 8D23IH, subject to the conditions that the final site plan meets city engineering standards, the foundation to reflect the height of existing houses on the block can be clad in stucco, final siding materials meet the design guidelines, revision to placement of the side elevation windows with approval by staff, and then revisions to differentiate from the adjacent new house at 1719 Texas Avenue with approval by staff.
Thank you, Lindsay.
I have a question. Do you have any ideas on how you would differentiate between the two houses?
Well, what we've done before is we can make that front porch a hip roof instead of a gable, so it doesn't look like the one next to it.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I would like to make a motion to approve per staff recommendation.
Thank you.
Yeah, including the differentiation.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Matthew and a second from Laura to approve based on staff recommendations. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have 103 Oakwood Avenue, which is 8E23IH. And I will get to the right page. The applicant is Jonathan Winkleman. Is the applicant present?
He's present on Zoom.
Can you hear us on Zoom?
Hey, Lindsay, I'm here.
Hi. Okay, Lindsay is going to lead us through the staff report.
Okay, so this is a new primary residence fronting Oglewood Avenue. It's a one-story house with a front gable roof clad in asphalt shingles. The exterior will be clad in a fiber cement siding with an 8-inch exposure. This house is approximately 25 feet wide by 44 feet long, and it's proposed to be set approximately 18 feet 4 inches from the front property line. The parking is a 10-foot wide concrete driveway along the side of the house accessed via Oglewood Avenue. As you can see on these drawings, the facade has a recessed corner porch on the left side. There's a centrally located door. On the left elevation, there is one double hung window, and then on the right elevation, there are two full double hungs and then two transom windows centered there. There is a recessed corner porch on the rear elevation as well. This house is proposed to be set 18 feet approximately from the front property line. The average front setback of the block is 14.7 feet. The adjacent houses are 16 and 12 feet from the front property line. So this house should be moved towards the front property line to maintain a consistent streetscape pattern with the block. The parking does meet infill housing standards for streets without alleys. Final revisions to the site plan will be necessary to meet city engineering standards. The site plan includes a 7-foot, 7-inch deep recessed corner porch. You can see that where my cursor is right now. It's recessed below the primary roof line. This porch is not proportional to original porches on the block, being just recessed under this massing with no columns or supports. It doesn't use posts and railings like those in the historic era of the neighborhood's development, so those are quotes from the design guidelines. The porch should be revised in design, incorporating columns or a more compatible roofline element to be compatible with the context. The guidelines also recommend that window and door styles be similar, with similar proportions and ratio of solid to void to historic houses on the block. Revisions are necessary to the front and side elevation window placement and to including the asymmetrical alignment of the facade windows, which has been somewhat revised from the initial proposal. The small transom windows on the right side elevation, and then the left side elevation's large swath of siding with no transparency. The proposed roof pitch and material are appropriate within the guidelines, and the siding material does meet the guidelines. The foundation should be clad in stucco to reflect the context instead of an exposed CMU. So the staff's recommending approval of 8E23IH subject to the conditions that the final site plan meets city engineering standards. The foundation reflects the height of existing houses on the block and be clad in stucco. Revisions to the front porch be submitted to staff for approval, and then revisions to the placement and design of facade and side elevation windows with approval by staff.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does the applicant have anything to say in response to the staff report?
Yeah, this is John Winkleman. The only thing that I would add for the approximately 8-foot front porch there, I would propose doing a craftsman style tapered post or column on the left side there. Just was not able to do that with the renderings on my program. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here opposed to the project? Okay, then we'll open it up for discussion.
I think that one thing that makes the porch on the front that much odd is the placement of the front door, how it's essentially just slammed up into the corner. There's just, I think the fact that the gable is basically split in half, you've got one side and the other is what this project's fighting on both sides of its proportions. So is there any opportunity to adjust the entry door and window, I guess, east, or I guess left on the page that we're looking at currently, to be able to get that entry door away from the side wall that it's tucked in currently? I mean, it's all plan design at that point.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem to move it, I would say at least 6 inches to the left.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly more. Kind of have a laundry room in that area that I would be constrained by moving it too far, but could definitely be moved.
Conventionally, the room arrangement on the left side of the house is flipped. Generally, your laundry room's in the back and your living room's in the front and the kitchen's between them. What is your thought process that has you enter into the basically laundry room and have those services up front and put the living room in the back?
Well, my thought there is to be able to take advantage of a porch on the rear and backyard view rather than having that closed off by a laundry room closet in the rear.
To Perry's comment, the whole eyes on the street is odd in this configuration. That's right. That you'll always be looking behind your house rather than at the street line for where traffic and people are that come up to the home and that sort of thing. If you did add the columns that you're speaking about, is it just one for that front porch? Or would you be flanking both sides with columns and having stairs up to it and kind of building out that porch to be more congruent to the context?
It would just be one post on the left unless I used smaller, just 4x4 posts. I mean, you could fit two going that route, but that really wouldn't be as aesthetically pleasing from my perspective as a larger, 12x12 base with a tapered top.
Mm-hmm. Was staff recommendation for them to revise the porch and for staff approval after this?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what I'm getting to is like we can't visualize what your thoughts are till it's drawn. So that's, I guess, what we can do to actually make sure there's some rectification to that entry. But I'd consider what Perry said as well about adjusting that floor plan, because I think that would give you some opportunity at the porch to be able to adjust the door over, like we mentioned, and have it open up more on that north or that front end.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great recommendation, but this is my personal home. So, I really do not want the laundry room at the rear. So
Yeah, I found it
I'll probably keep that as is.
an interesting approach, more looked at living in it than convention. The notion you want to orient to your backyard and privacy and more of a rural setting than the conventional notion of being engaged with the street. which is more conventional, but I found it a curious plan, and I'm interested in your reasoning, and I think it's a sound reasoning, though unconventional.
Yep.
Any other comments?
Can you show the floor plan one more time? So that front window's looking into the laundry room. Is there an opportunity, and I've already heard you speak about the layout, to move the laundry room in between the back living area and move the kitchen forward? And have more light coming into your kitchen?
I mean, you could do that, but then that would kill the island set up behind the sink there in the kitchen, kind of opening the kitchen to the living area.
Okay, I see it. Yep. It is.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I motion to approve per staff recommendation, including the revisions to the front porch with approval by staff, since that's been a topic of discussion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Cameron and a second by Laura to approve based on staff recommendation, including the porch revisions approved by staff. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, ayes have it. Thank you. All right, next up, we have the project at 3527 Oswald Street, which is case number 8G23IH.
Okay, this is a new building. This is a typo here saying DT. This is IH. So this is a new multifamily building. It's part of a broader mixed-use development on an approximately 8-acre property in Lincoln Park. It previously held manufacturing facilities and other industrial uses. The applicant rezoned the property from IH, heavy industrial, to IMU, industrial mixed use, to allow for some compatible commercial, single-family, and multifamily residential uses. So 3 single-family houses have been constructed on the property. They were reviewed by the Design Review Board in August 2021. And so on this piece of property, and to the applicant, I do have your whole case file, but for this presentation, I'll just go through some of the slides, but when you're ready to present, I will have all that available. This is located on the northeast corner of the overall property, so you can see that here. And the building will be set between 7 feet 10 inches and 9 feet 4 inches from the front, which is the east property line. So you can see the site plan. And this is the building in question that we're talking about. So this building is C-shaped. It is between 2 and 3 stories tall. It has a flat roof and an exterior clad in thin brick and metal panel or fiber cement siding and a brick clad foundation. It wraps around the 3 single-family houses with one 2-story massing on the north side of the house. So this is the north massing. A 2-story massing on the west side of the houses. That's this right here to the rear. And then a 2-story massing with a recessed 3rd-story penthouse on the south side of the windows. The buildings are largely, I'm going to go to the rendering for this. The north and south massings are predominantly clad in brick veneer. There's a series of projecting bays, and windows are evenly spaced along the facades. The east elevations, they're aligned on the 1st and 2nd stories using single light metal casements with flat brick sills and arches. Similar patterns wrap around the north and south elevations. The center massing, which is behind the single family houses, is clad in metal panel or fiber cement siding with pass-throughs to access the future adjacent pedestrian alley. And then there is glass block on the rear here, adjacent to those lower level pass-throughs. And there are some metal casement windows there. The site plan includes walkways from the doors to the street, and there is parking that's planned for a shared parking lots located south and west of the buildings. So I'm going to run through some of the comments. Overall, the new building, it'll be aligned in the general front setback with the single-family houses. The facades will continue the streetscapes along Oswald Street that were created by these 3 single-family houses. It reflects the general existing front yard space of the new houses and the 2 existing houses to the south of the block, which would be down here. Guidelines recommend that new housing be proportional to the dimensions of the lot and other housing on the block, and that multifamily housing be comparable in height to traditional single-family houses along the street. These 3 new construction houses are 2-story. The multifamily form typically requires an increase in height from the 1-story minimal traditional and Queen Anne cottage at the end of the block. However, due to these existing single-family houses, the 2-story building won't detract from the overall streetscape. They will be comparable in height to the new construction houses, and that 3rd-story penthouse is recessed. That's this element right here, recessed from the primary roof line to reduce that visual impact. The interior, rear, and side setbacks from the existing single-family houses are relatively narrow. There may be site plan revisions necessary to meet the fire separation standards. There'll be building code input from plans review and inspections. Parking is proposed as a lot south of the building. It's separated by a future building here. Any parking that immediately adjoins Oswald Street should incorporate landscaping and screening from the street as necessary, and the final site plan should meet engineering standards. This building is larger in height and scale than the surrounding neighborhood context. It is a multifamily structure. The design incorporates projecting bays and covered stoops to break up the facade and the side elevation massings, and the foundation is comparable to historic foundation heights. The guideline for multifamily buildings speaks to continuing the architectural rhythm of the block, using porches, bays, and breaks in the facade to mimic the look of older houses, dividing them into separate sections that are proportionately similar to the block, and these projecting bays help create massings that are similar to the adjacent houses. Overall, the proposal has sufficient windows and a consistent pattern of alignment, avoiding large swaths of siding with no transparency. Similar to these single-family houses, which you may remember the glass block element there, they will be present on the rear elevation of this west massing, not visible from the right-of-way. The board may choose to discuss the single light casement windows in comparison with the window recommendations in the guidelines. Double-hung windows may align with historic housing forms and break up those massings. Finally, the predominant exterior materials, which you can see called out here in detail, include a thin brick veneer and metal panel or fiber cement siding, which do meet the design guidelines for infill. The applicant should provide final specs for brick veneer and metal panel or fiber cement siding to staff for approval in advance of permitting. So the staff recommendation is approval of 8G23IH subject to the following conditions: that the final site plan and parking areas meet city engineering standards, any parking areas fronting Oswald Street to receive landscaping and screening to meet the design guidelines, final drawings meet the standards of the IMU zone and the principal use standards for multifamily dwellings, and specs for final materials to be submitted to staff for approval.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant present?
Logan Higgins. Excuse me. Logan Higgins, 133 Southgate Street.
Thank you. Do you have any comments related to Lindsay's report?
If you would care to go to the site plan, I'll just I won't go through the entire packet presentation that we put together. I'm assuming that was provided and everyone's had the opportunity to look through it. So I'd rather be able to respond to any questions or explainers, but I do want to point out that this is the second phase of multiple. This is a full 8-acre site, and we're dealing with about 10,000, well, less than 10,000 square feet of that site. So less than quarter of an acre on a 8-acre site. So the as we progress with this, we really designed this this phase to try to act as a transition with the more traditional neighborhood to what will end up being on the future phases. However, that will end up looking. Those aren't designed yet, but we looked at historic neighborhoods with townhouses in them, and some of those forms, and mainly 4th and Gill. We see a lot of that, and then a lot of older townhouses that have been demolished in the past, and So that's what we kind of approached this with to offer that transition between the two. So I know that it is kind of odd the way we're wrapping around the three houses, and there's been some discussion about maybe breaking it into different phases, and our intent in doing that rear section right there in a very different form was to try to minimize that the visuals of that and let those two side pieces be their own language, and then this be kind of a connector. And the intent there, we had originally planned on those being individual cottages, but between the economies of scale and being able to, by making this a multifamily occupancy, and then we're able to connect services such as sprinkler and actually get better fire protection in those units back there. And so it really made sense to connect all of those and treat it that way. So if I'm like I said, happy to answer any questions, and I really could take an hour or two going through the details of this and our future, the ideas and the future phases. So I'd rather just be here to be a resource. Thanks.
Thank you. Before we get too much further, is there any opposition to the project? Please state your name and address.
Hi, Michelle Ivester, Oakwood Lincoln Park Neighborhood Association. Oakwood Lincoln Park Neighborhood Association. Put that back up. I live on Chickamauga Avenue. We don't have. No, that's not true. So the neighborhood just found out about this new revision about a week and a half ago, and we really haven't had time to notify all the neighbors. The few that I have spoke with are not in favor of the huge multifamily. When we were originally brought the original design, it was supposed to be all single-family residences along Oswald, because that would help buffer and the transition to the multifamily, et cetera, the businesses, et cetera, behind that, and we were all for that. We had numerous meetings with Mr. Higgins as well as with city reps, et cetera, and so this is kind of a little bit of a shock for us, and the neighbors have not been sufficiently notified about the changes. So I originally came here asking to postpone and maybe give us some time to set up a meeting with those who are going to be directly impacted for that area, to let them, to set up a meeting with Mr. Higgins and have him come and directly speak with the residents, as opposed to, I mean, he did come to our neighborhood meeting, but it was such a shock for all of us because we weren't prepared for all the changes. It didn't go very well, unfortunately. So that would be my ask, is to maybe postpone the decision today and come back next month, because neighbors aren't overly pleased with already what has gone in. They were, they were promised to have streetscapes and sidewalks. There's been no landscaping done. There's no sidewalks. The houses themselves are all very narrow and very close together. I have pictures if anyone hasn't driven by there. And the lot itself hasn't had any type of maintenance done to it in quite some time. So my ask for the neighborhood was that please allow us time to get together so that maybe we can give their company some input on what we would like to have possibly come to some sort of a happy compromise, because this does not fit in our neighborhood at all. I mean, it's not even close. There's nothing like it anywhere around. And Oswald, I don't know if any of you all are familiar, is a very narrow street. And there's really no way to expand it. That's what Mr. Higgins was talking about before, is having the city come in and expand it. But there's no way to do that, because the houses that he's already built are right on the street, and the other side is already private property. So I can't imagine that neighbors are going to want to give up their rights to their property just to make a bigger street. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments. We'll open it up for discussion, and you'll have an opportunity to reply.
If I could just respond, we would not, unless the board really thinks that it's necessary, we would not want to postpone for 30 days. And the reason being the reference change is based off previous schematics of the big picture plan. As I explained at the neighborhood meeting, that as we refine that and the world has changed drastically over the past few years, the master plan has gone through different changes with it and responses to the economy and everything else. So we spoke a week and a half ago with the neighbors, and I encouraged any feedback and anyone to reach out, and if there was a specific critique or questions or anything else. And the only email, the only response that we received beyond that meeting was an email last night about end of day yesterday about requesting the postponement. And at this level, obviously we've showed renderings and more aesthetic images here, but our construction drawings are at about an 80% of completion, and we've got the full packet. I wouldn't be against making changes, and I'm still happy to meet with the neighbors to discuss recommendations and everything. But the primary concern seems to be around the use, which would not be changing the occupancy. And so anything that, really my point is that if we were to make changes, which we're not against, they would require the same amount of work whether this is voted on today or next month. And so really we're happy to meet with the neighbors, but if we end up making changes, we're equally happy to bring it back and get approval for those changes. So just wanted to say we would prefer not to postpone, but like I said, if you all, the board, overwhelmingly think that is necessary, then we're happy to do so. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Is there anyone else here that wants to speak in opposition? Okay, then we'll open it up for discussion by the board.
Logan, I have two questions. One is, what would postponing 30 days do to your schedule, or how would it impede your progress?
We've kind of paused where we're at to try to get this approval because of any potential changes that we might need to make. But after we proceed with our drawings, wrapping those up, we're still looking at another few weeks to get that wrapped up and then submit for permit review. There's a lot of little details in this project, and there's a lot with the stormwater. So point being, that is going to be a long process. So we're already looking at a postponement would not be ideal with where we're at currently. So it would, just that extra month would be kind of, we wouldn't want to do any work in between now and then. So
My second question is, what is your plan for the sidewalks and landscaping?
Oh yeah, so the sidewalks in front of the houses was not a requirement because of the scale of that phase. But when we poured the driveways, we did ensure a ADA level pad in the middle for the sidewalks to connect to. So the sidewalks would be designed by the civil engineers and be installed accordingly, so that there's a space for them, but it just didn't make sense to do it at the time when we didn't have everything on like that area right there figured out. Because if we put the sidewalks pointing the wrong direction or at the wrong elevation, we could end up having to come in and tear out everybody's driveways and redo that. So
You're proposing them now, though.
yes,
So they're they're included in this.
yes, yeah.
In the rendering of the overhead, you show, to Michelle's point, you keep showing the sidewalk on the plan east side, which to her point, there's a swale and private property and all that. Is that intention or just aspirational drawing with a rendering?
Yeah, that was a little bit of creative expression by the renderer, and I should have had that taken out.
To follow up on one of Matthew's question, what made you not, with all these timelines, why didn't you bring this for a workshop review like you've done in the past? Which would have mitigated probably a lot of potential, would have gotten the concern in front of us and the community a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
What was the strategy behind not bringing it to that?
There wasn't really a strategy by not. We've been looking at this for a while now, and I mean, on the drawing board essentially, and so I think internally we're just so used to it that we didn't really think much about the workshop aspect of this.
I've got a few questions. Some of them are relevant, some of them aren't, but I'm going to ask them anyway. Did you have to remediate any of this site based on its previous zoning?
No, no, we've had a phase 1 done, and it's all good. All good, yeah.
Okay. The material, the exterior material, it looks great. It's something that we talk about a lot amongst ourselves about how to improve the quality of the material. You've referenced a thin brick. Do you know what type of thin brick you're going to have, or are you still determining that?
We've got a product. I saw it in an email today, the link to it, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Is it new brick?
I don't think so.
You know new brick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, but and I'm wondering how much they're paying you, but
At the same question.
That's just twice.
Joking.
Too many. Okay. You said that you were at 80% CDs. Have you had these 80% CDs priced yet?
No, and that we're in that process right now.
Okay. That will change a lot of things when you get pricing back.
Yes,
you know.
and that might be. I didn't really think about that with the in regards to our scheduling, but that's probably, now that I think about it, part of my concern is if we get that back and they say there's the whole list of things that really are just not available or need to be adjusted, then it's possible that we would be looking at changes and redos anyways, which has me additionally nervous. So I still would, regardless, I would like to meet with the neighbors more. But that's why I think that if we're making changes, it's all going to happen together anyways. So.
In the report, it says the predominant exterior materials include thin brick veneer and metal panel or fiber cement. Does that mean metal panel or fiber cement, or brick veneer or metal panel and fiber?
The brick veneer for sure.
Okay.
It's metal or fiber cement on that back portion.
Okay. And are you asking for any public assistance funding-wise, pilot or capital monies? Okay.
No.
Is this all going to be market rate?
I believe so. And we don't really have control over that aspect of it, but there's realtors involved who are putting that together. I hope it works out that way. But that's really part of the reason that there's not any more single family is because the rates in the area to build the quality that we're pursuing here don't really justify the sales, and the cost of construction are way too close and sometimes the wrong side. So,
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, there's 3 existing houses on this very large site and multifamily. Are these separated to separate parcels?
the 3 houses are. Everything else we don't expect to subdivide. We're planning on putting them into a condo type of legal structure.
And so are you far enough along in the site design to know that your stormwater requirements are adequate? Or
To
your
know for
stormwater
what?
solution is adequate for the requirements?
The civil engineers have done the calculations and sizing based off of what the amount of impervious area that we're planning. So we feel very confident about that. And to speak to the stormwater, the plan for that is on the this phase right now, we're expecting to put a just regular detention basin, and that'll go right where the future parking will go. And the way the civil engineers have planned it out is to have that be regular basin for now, and then when we get ready for more parking, that will become enclosed and become underground. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Cameron?
Before we move past the new brick comment, let's clarify, when you say brick in your application and then you say thin brick, when you say thin brick, how is this going to be, like, what is its substructure that's going to be installed on?
So we're planning on wood frame construction, and we'll have wood and then we would like to do thin brick. If something changes and it becomes thick brick or regular brick, then
Good brick.
We would bring that to
Well, the reason
staff.
I ask is on the concern of the neighborhood and durability. There's a lot of subpar materials being built with in the area, in the spirit of cost. I understand that, but in the longevity and the spirit of our guidelines of having comparable durability of materials, I keep harping on durability. Would the thin brick be installed on a rain screen system? And the reason I say that, the brick masonry, which is a veneer, has a gap behind it which allows it to drain. That's been that way for a long time. Thin brick is traditionally troweled on with, yes, a drainage thin layer, but it just doesn't have the potential of drying and longevity, which is why I've always been a bleeding advocate for actual brick. So, full circle, did the choice, because you were talking about pricing and not knowing the pricing, are you preemptively VEing your project, hoping that it comes in budget by having a lesser material, in my opinion, than actual brick?
No. So, lot of layers there. I like some aspects of thin brick because, and there's a joke that gets thrown around that brick is a 4-inch layer of paint. But when you're doing a brick as a facade that's not part of the structure, I think that it makes a lot more sense when you have like historic buildings that are the brick is the structure. So we've used thin brick in the past for various reasons. For example, with historic construction, typically the brick was the foundation walls were brick, and then the siding was above that. Well, to use a brick facade on the outside, you end up like with the brick roll-lock, brick ledge. So to keep that in line, we've used thin brick in the past. Say that to say, I've not heard as much about the longevity of thin brick as I've not really heard complaints about it. I've actually heard that it can also be more expensive to install. So I was hoping that wouldn't be the case here. And that's mainly because not as many people have experience with thin brick as with regular brick. So the only other reason behind it was just to, and this doesn't have a lot of impact, but have more space on the porches and have a little bit more control over how we handle the facade. So we're not married to the idea of thin brick. We're completely open to regular brick. And speaking of longevity, that's why ideally we would go with metal on the back, is because I think that really metal is one of the best materials that facade materials that you can use for the longevity. But that's where VE could come into play with the fiber cement. So if you think that thin brick, and if there are reports of thin brick problems, like I want to look into that some more, but we would be completely open to either.
I guess just to the neighborhood representatives, like complaints about it being foreign, and yes, you chose a precedent from 4th and Gill, which I know those 2 townhouses. It's at the end of Deary Street where I used to live. But to Michelle's point, did you find examples of townhome masonry buildings in Oakwood Lincoln Park as a reference? Is that included in the packet?
We didn't include any. There's not much multifamily in Oakwood Lincoln Park, and what is there is either a less of a brownstone look and more of just a plain but historic look, and or that's like I'm thinking of along Broadway and whatnot.
I'm thinking on Chickamauga. If you went on Chickamauga, it's not got townhomes, but their 2-story houses have a similar massing and scale to what you're trying to achieve. You used those as precedents for your homes the last time you came. That's what I was expecting to see as a reference to the work you were proposing, or is that sort of scale and having congruity to the neighborhood whenever you were working through this. So it's a stark, which is to their surprise, I guess, when it goes from wood frame gable construction to a flat roof brick construction, is why it's a harder, I guess, pill to swallow.
Yeah. Do you know the block or address for the Chickamauga?
Chickamauga just runs literally east-west behind Oswald. If you go south on Oswald, you'll hit it having to get back towards downtown.
I mean, do you know which
block?
Which property you're referencing?
No, I don't know the name of it. But if you just go down the east side of Chickamauga, north side of the street, you will find multiple 2-story. I mean, look at your old precedents you had for the houses. That's what I'm saying. I think you used some.
Are you talking about single-family houses or
the single-family houses that you referenced? I'm just saying there's for instance, like none of those have a balcony on them and that sort of stuff, which is also a stark difference, I think, that's probably being recognized in this proposal as well.
Okay, I'm going to interject a little bit here to say that this is turning a little bit into a design charrette, which is not the purpose of our meeting today. But it does illustrate the value of doing a workshop. So I would remind you of that for the future. Is there any other specific questions or comments related to the project as we're looking at it today?
I'll get to those. How about that? So you've raised the project on a plinth. What's the purpose of having the stoop and not down at the ground street level? Like the houses adjacent to it?
Accessibility.
Accessibility?
Yeah, from the parking to maintain the same elevation. And so there are stairs shown here, but there's also ramps that you don't see in the elevation here. So in order to keep it at a elevation where the buildings are accessible from the accessible parking space, this was our best elevation.
And then the in-site plan there, which was opportunistic with the first phase setting the left house back, what's the intention of setting the face of that left side building back off the street as you are, rather than hugging it closer?
The one labeled as future building?
No, the one we're talking about today, it's set back and not hugging the street like the houses to the right, the existing homes. What was the purpose of setting it back the 8 feet?
I believe that came from accessibility as well, because so you can kind of see here there's the stairs coming from the sidewalk, but then also from the promenade, there's a route coming along parallel to the sidewalk, and that's the accessible route there. And so in order to get the clearances that we needed to access those units, we had to push it back just a little bit.
Those, just in general, those two things are fighting the walkability of that street, I think, for the fact that the project's being up on, one, it's up on a plinth, and two, it's pushed back. I think that's probably also some negative implications of that decision that doesn't make it seem as integrated in the streetscape as the previous homes that were placed. Is the penthouse accessible to the roof?
No.
Okay.
Are there any other comments?
Last thing on the windows, I would have given the intentional stark contrast of the more modern infill of the homes and then the townhouses. What was there a study done of having actual mullions? I mean, I'm a modernist as much as anybody, and I like clear, like glass, full glass. But there might be something again more palatable to have that texture of the mullions integrated in that. Was there a study done by that when you guys were working through it?
Yes. We did look at both double hung and double hung with some mutton bars and whatnot in it. It really came down to two things. One, I think that the windows that we're planning to use here are incredibly functional. They're metal windows, very good insulation and screening. They open easily. There's a lot of good features of them. And then also with the adjacent houses, we use the same windows. So it's
yeah,
matching
and they
those.
make casement windows that have that same energy efficiency that you're talking about, that have integrated muttons. Just as an FYI, we've used that on a couple projects that were same reasons for the energy efficiency and durability, but they had the muttons along with them and the side lights. One last thing, as you're working through if the balconies that act as the entry canopy do remain, you have two roofs you've introduced that both have to mitigate water, and both will have downspouts that aren't shown currently. I just know how tricky those are to make look good when you apply the downspouts. So rather than those to be an afterthought and just tacked on and as a massive design element on the street, I think consider that. And also a follow-up to the underside of the balconies. What are you planning on cladding the underside? So when you enter, what are you looking up at the underside of those balconies? And not just metal deck or something like that.
We have not identified that anything for that. If anything, we would use basically decking on the bottom so that there is the opportunity for it to drain.
Mm-hmm.
But that will be, the balcony is intended to be a deck. So water would still be able to penetrate through that. And I think, and possibly we might be thinking of a similar scenario where there are balconies that are highly visible, that the bottom of them are very visible from the street and very exposed. There's a project in South Knoxville that is townhouses and does a similar thing with the balconies. They're open underneath, but because it's only 2 stories, the effect is not nearly as jarring. So I'm less worried about it here than if we were talking about 3rd and 4th floors.
Right. It'll just make the project look that much more finesse, though, if it is cladded in something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the history of 2 particular buildings that come to mind, but there's the Fairmount Flats and then the Fairmount condos. They're on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
Those are both multifamily dwellings, and I don't know, I guess the flats have been updated more recently. I don't know if the board would have ever reviewed that, but it might be something to consider looking at both of those as examples within that close area.
Do we have a motion?
Just a comment before the motion. If they don't know how much it costs and they don't know what the materials are, what are we approving? Because I can VE the heck out of that drawing right there. Things will start going away and it won't look the same. So what are we approving?
If we were to VE and make changes from that, then we would come back for those changes. So I wouldn't worry about us going away, making changes, and those not being reviewed and approved.
So we're approving what we're seeing in the drawings. I mean, today.
But that might not be what they build.
Then they got to come back,
Okay, fair enough.
right?
As long as we understand that that's the process and agree to it.
Yeah.
But then what's the threshold for them coming back? Is it their own impetus?
No, that's typically a staff interpretation. In this instance, what we're reviewing, he's pretty specific about the materials, the fenestration, the design, and so anything that differentiates, that diverges from what is on the screen right now and what is specified would return to the board.
Okay, thank you.
I just don't know how we can't neglect the spokesperson of the neighborhood's issue when wanting to, eloquently stated, wanting to work. I don't know if the opportunities have been there, but wanting to work with the designer, not to say let's kill the project, but let's discuss it. I think them just trying to have an ownership somewhat of the process is what they're looking for, just because that's where they've invested their lives to live there. I don't think anyone's against progress, and that lot's just sat there looking at everybody for a long time. So I'm glad to see something happening. I think the potential to discuss it is, I think, what the neighborhood's looking for, and I think we as the board have to recognize that as well.
So do we have a motion?
I motion to postpone because of the reasons stated.
Second.
Is that, Cameron, is that a postponement to the September meeting?
Yes.
All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me restate that. Cameron has a motion. Rick seconded to postpone until the September meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. We are going to move on now to our next project, which is 406 West Church Avenue. The applicant is Bill Vinson from Community Tectonics. And the case number is 8A23DT. And Lindsay will take us through the report.
Yes, so this is a relatively minor exterior rehab project. It will accommodate a basement level interior renovation. So on the east elevation, you can see the existing conditions and then the proposed conditions here. And actually, I'll go here. So here's an existing garage door. This is the left side elevation. A garage door will be removed, and it will be infilled with a 3-part 1/1 double hung windows. And then also on this east elevation, the left side of the basement level entry vestibule will receive a new aluminum clad wood door accessible by the existing stairs. So you can see right here the existing stair line and a detail of that element here. The scope of work also includes new exhaust vents and basic repair and repointings to the exterior masonry. So this is a contributing resource to the South Market National Register Historic District. So the historic resources section applies. Overall, this proposal meets the design guidelines as it incorporates a secondary entry to a residential building separated from that sidewalk's pedestrian flow. It uses an existing stair. There's already a basement level door there facing the front, and this one will be on the side elevation. And the new door doesn't require the removal of any character defining features. Removing the garage door and installing new windows meets the design guidelines, and all this work will be very minimally visible from the street, fronting a pedestrian alley. So staff recommends approval of 8A23DT as submitted.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant present?
Yes, I am.
Hello there.
Bill Vinson, 7610 Gleason Road.
Do you have any comments related to Lindsay's report?
Oh, I think that pretty well covered. I might say that we took a lot of effort. We've got some new mechanical units on the roof, and we ran all the condensate lines and mechanical lines interior, so we wouldn't have anything exposed on the face of the building.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody opposed to the project present? Great, then we will open it up for discussion.
My only comment is the exhaust vents. That is something that I know it's a necessary evil. You have to quickly get them out of the building from the dryer. If there was, and you've ganged the two on the right. If there was any way, which I don't know how the floor plan would lay out, to gang them all in at one central location, that would mitigate the obstruction to the historic facade just that much more. Is that a possibility, do you think?
Possibly. There is very severe height restrictions in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have taken a lot of effort to route piping and plumbing and vents to where they don't cross one another to get the ceiling heights any lower than possible. I'm a little concerned if we try to run those all to one location, we're going to be either having some chases along the interior that would be down at 7 feet or something that wouldn't be very desirable on the inside either.
Yeah, so maybe whatever the brick color is, just try to match it with a paint that makes it go away that much more. I understand, yeah, that's probably really tight down there.
That would be no problem to paint to match the color of the brick. That would be fine.
All right.
Any other comments? Hearing none.
I'll make a
You have a
motion to approve based on staff recommendation.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Rick, a second by Laura to approve based on staff recommendation. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have a project located at 427 Walnut Street. It's file number 8C23DT, and the applicant is Tate Wright Elevate Architecture Studio.
All right. So this is a proposed new 7-story hotel building. It's proposed for an irregular site on the 400 blocks of Locust Street and Walnut Street. The site currently has a surface parking lot. It has frontage on both Locust and Walnut Streets. So some notes about the site layout and access. There's no on-site parking provided within the proposed structure. There's a vehicular entrance located on the right side of the Walnut Street elevation that provides access to an internal vehicular drive occupying the ground floor. That entrance measures 28 feet 1 inch wide, and it accesses a round drop-off valet area with 3 spaces and an accessible space. The only public pedestrian access point on Walnut is located to the left side of the elevation, accessed next to this spot marked office retail. On the Locust Street elevation, there's only a secondary service entrance that's there. This entrance would not be accessible to the public or hotel guests. Some of the design elements: the flat roof building is proposed to be clad in a fiber reinforced siding of a faux wood finish, composite metal panels in a light gray, and then composite metal panels in black. There's a 2-story brick masonry section, or a brick cladding section, fronting Locust Street. I can run through some additional descriptions of the building, but we can also go through that with these elevation drawings. So some of the comments: this site is proposed for a narrow parking lot. It's adjacent to the historic Daylight Building to the south and the Langley parking garage to the west. And I can pull those site images up provided by the applicant as well while we discuss. Other than the historic Daylight Building and the Pembroke Building across Union, this block is characterized by new construction and parking garages. On the Locust Street, it will adjoin the Langley Garage and a surface parking lot across the street from the Kendrick Place row houses. So the blocks do have somewhat less pedestrian activity than the busiest corridors of downtown, but many users park in those garages to access other downtown locations. The application doesn't include on-site parking. However, almost all of the ground floor fronting Walnut Street is dedicated to automobiles. There's a drive-through drop-off for hotel guests. This is an approximately 56-foot wide facade, and 28-foot 1 inches of that are devoted to automobile entry and exit. So users of the hotel will enter through this full-light pedestrian door on the left side of the facade, and I'll show that in the renderings here. And walk through the covered outdoor waiting area or walk onto this auto access drive into an entry vestibule that's located at the rear, recessed in the center of the building. Design guidelines encourage maintaining pedestrian scaled environments from block to block, creating building materials and entries at a human scale to create an engaging pedestrian experience, using first floor uses to draw walk-in traffic, and creating a transparent and consistent rhythm of entrances and windows at ground level. The ground level facade design fronting Walnut is primarily devoted to autos, and it does not meet the design guidelines. There is a small space that's marked as office and retail on the left half of the facade. You can see that on the site plan here. It's unclear how that Marriott chain would connect with a secondary business for a 395 square foot commercial space. This space does not sufficiently activate the streetscape for pedestrians, as there are no street-facing entry doors. The only entry extends off that left side recessed entry. On the Locust Street elevation, there are no public spaces. The elevation includes a service entry, which is a door with no transparency. You can see that in the elevation drawings here. A roll-up garage door, and then a series of storefront windows opening to the employee break room. Hotel users and visitors won't be able to enter the hotel from this door. The employee break room will not have heavy use and doesn't feature a door to the street. So the ground floor locus elevation doesn't meet the design guidelines, as it doesn't contribute to the pedestrian experience, draw walk-in users, and lacks the transparency that's recommended to engage the street. On the south elevation, which you can see on the site plan here, this is the elevation that adjoins the Daylight Building. There are basement level residences that are currently separated from the surface parking lot by a fence and landscaping. They're sort of below grade there. The application lacks information on how this new hotel and that side elevation will engage the residences and the side elevation of the Daylight Building. That light gray metal panel siding may have an adverse visual effect on those residences when in direct sunlight. One element here that has been addressed since the staff recommendation, so the DK dimensional standards require buildings over 85 feet to incorporate a step back. So that's sort of a recession, somewhat a minimum of 10 feet from the street-facing facade plane. It must occur above the third story, so about here, and below the seventh. This building height, when the staff report, it may exceed 85 feet and require a step back. And so the plans review and inspections has confirmed that the building does require a step back, so a revised design will need to be submitted. Overall, staff's recommending postponement of 8C 23DT to encourage the applicant to revise the ground level elevations fronting both Locust and Walnut Street to meet the guidelines and create pedestrian-oriented environments at street level, identify any access or zoning issues with plans review and inspections, and then address that height step back requirement along with design comments identified by the board.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is a representative here for the project? Can you say your name and address, please?
My name is Hitesh Patel. I'm with the Elevate Architecture Studio, and the ownership team is here as well. Talk about the hotel.
Thank you. Do you have comments related to Lindsay's report?
Yes, so since we've gotten Lindsay's staff report, we have been discussing some of the needs and revisions that we will be making. In addition, we've also had a pre-submittal meeting with city engineering. A lot of some of our concerns, I think we've worked through in our planning stages on Monday. A lot of the comments, some of the comments in regards to pedestrian access off of both Locust and Walnut had to do with the topographical challenges that we were working with, connecting the two sides of the street. And so on the Walnut side, and we probably go into more detail, but for example, on the Walnut side, the reason we didn't provide the access from the I guess, fronting Walnut was because we had to, we couldn't get a level ADA transition for that kind of commercial space on the ground floor. We couldn't get a access point, and so we knew that keeping our goal is to keep a pedestrian and vehicular separated, and we knew that the flattest portion of that site was going to be plan right hand side or plan left hand side there. And so our way to kind of provide access into that space was through, I guess, that notch, if you want to call it that recessed entry portion. And our civil engineers here as well kind of talk about, if we really want to go into detail regarding the topographical challenges. On the Locust Street side, we took a look at different types of pedestrian access to get just kind of see what we could do there. We have almost like an 11% grade. It's about a 6.5 step over that facade. And so the flattest portion of that site was kind of closest to Langley Street Garage. The other challenges we obviously had to deal with was taking a look at the utility configuration and working with KUB. And we've worked with KUB to kind of minimize that opening and that screen door opening for that transformer room. It does have to be ventilated, but we're obviously going to try to provide some type of screening element that the best that we can that will provide the airflow and ventilation that's required by KUB as well. And and then in regards to the storefront, we did take a look at seeing if there could be opportunity to connect that storefront to street level. But there's actually a lot of internal ramping that's also occurring on that level. And so in order to really provide any kind of connection from the employee break room or anything to Locust Street, it'd require a lot more steps and become really inaccessible. Like it wouldn't be ADA compliant off of Locust.
What is the alley condition between the Daylight building and your project?
So the one thing we did take note of from previous comments is we've relocated some of the function on the basement level. And so the alleyway ownership team, right now it's just I believe it's like a wooden slat wall that looks like it's honestly about to kind of fall. The ownership team's actually spoken to the owner about potentially they would go in at their cost and replace it with more of a solid wall. So it would kind of enhance that because we'd want to ensure that also complements the hotel as well. And secondly, we're using that alleyway for service access so we can avoid adding any more service fronting Locust or fronting Walnut as well. So we've talked with Trash as well, and Waste Connection, and they're okay with having the location of the trash pushed off the street. And then we've also looked at as much service as we can off that alleyway to avoid having to really take any more space off of Locust or Walnut.
So you access the alley from the Walnut side? Or the Locust side?
Locust side.
Oh.
So it'd be on the basement level.
I see. Okay.
Right. Yeah, so we've got, there's probably maybe a gist of the basement level plan, perhaps.
I have a couple of questions about the height, the setback thing over 85 feet. It appears that the building on the Walnut side could come in under that 85 feet and not require the step back. But on the Locust side, it would require the step back. Is that true? So we could have it step back only on the Locust side?
That is correct.
All right, yeah, because I was looking at the plan and trying to figure, well, how are you going to do that? Currently, the top is sort of a rooftop bar, and it steps back as a cover over it. Does that count as a story if it's open?
Yes.
Okay, so the rooftop could not be a covered outdoor area, at least not with a roof. It could have, I would assume, awning or some other things to cover it. Because I was looking at their plan, if they took on the 6th floor, since this has to occur below the 7th, took those 4 apartment units across the back and turned them sideways and had 2 of them, you could get your step back at that point and then have your rooftop bar above it. It would take out some space on your upstairs dining facility. But I was just looking at ways to achieve this that don't have dramatic impact. The pedestrian issues at the ground floor, that's a challenge I'll be interesting to see how it's solved because I don't have an answer.
Yeah, we had, I think the biggest was we knew that we had to have that flat area for at least to get, that entrance on the locust side. And that working through with the civil engineer, the location of that's really honestly probably the best location right now, just because of the height transition on, I know we're looking at Walnut, but on the locust side, the height transition between the Langley deck and the parking lot. And so we're trying to really make up that grade differential and also give access to KUB for that transformer room. So we really had to start sloping the site pretty significantly. One of the things we tried to do at the pedestrian scale too is we've talked to the city about incorporating planter walls along abutting the building, but still providing that clear 6.5-foot sidewalk on Locust as well.
What about the trees that are currently in the alley near the Walnut side? On the fence you're talking about. Are you going to keep those or?
I think they're on the other property.
They're right there. Yeah. Those.
I
mean, they're.
Yeah, they're on the adjacent property. So I think we'd have to work with them to talk about how that's going to work because right now I think.
Yeah, I'm asking. Are you going to plan to remove those trees?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, not if they're
Well, because you already worked with the
property.
owners on the fence, those by the fence. So.
Yeah, no, that's not our intention.
And this is just a point of contention. There are no trees on Walnut Avenue, like in your drawings. So if you go back to the like what it's going to look like, unless you're going to plant them, are you going to add trees to Walnut? Because I'm a big fan of that.
So we're within a 0 to 5 foot setback
Like,
limitation on Walnut.
Right there, like by the car, you added trees that do not exist.
Oh, yeah, that's.
So I got excited. I was like, he's going to add trees.
Oh,
My
yeah,
God.
that probably shouldn't have been in the rendering.
Okay.
Apologize for that. That's.
What are you proposing for the retail space, or is that trying to be to someone else to lease? On Walnut side, the discussion of the entry being not off the street. What would that space? Would that be just a coffee shop owned by the hotel, or are you truly going to lease it to an outside business?
We've talked about a couple of different options with the ownership team. One thought was doing like a shared office space that could be rented out to smaller businesses, like a smaller WeWorks kind of space potentially. And then the coffee shop, that's an opportunity. That part. The only thing with that is there's going to be function of that within the hotel already. So I don't know if that's really going to be utilized well.
My overall comments to add on this elevation specifically is about the materiality. We mentioned this during the workshop. The predominant over, 75%, 60% is a wood look fiber cement. And it just simply isn't palatable with the context around it. In my opinion, it is going to really date the project and not fit in with the context that it's within. In addition to the metal panel composite, there's something about the south side that I can start to get on board with for the fact that it has 2-story of masonry, though it's gray. But on this elevation, the brown material, I would have been more accepting of it if it was just a brown, bronze, or copper-esque fiber cement rather than it's the wood look that is just going to completely contrast and have no reference to anything around it, which I think is a fault. And then finally, the light bars, the violin strings, as I said it when I first saw it, those are going to have probably program lighting scenarios, correct?
Potentially. I don't know if we've thought that in depth. We were thinking about just highlighting them in the evening time more than having them programmed.
That's a drawing that's missing. We'll need to see some sort of rendering of what that's going to look like. And is that something that would have to go for, I mean, that's a signage moment at that point, I would think, with the lighting. It's not lighting an entry, it's an embellishment to it. I remember whatever project on Vine Avenue, there was a tower that somebody had proposed that was gonna be 20 feet in the air, and it was gonna be lit up different colors at different times of year. And that's what scares me about this, is that it's gonna be this neon aperture on the outside or a
So I don't think
fixture.
I don't think the brand would allow us to do that, to be honest. And part of our conversation after the last round was going back to Marriott and talking to them about the materiality and the palette. And we've had this conversation with them as well.
Mhm.
And so we really went in depth and had the conversation. The thing that they're wanting to experience is the AC brand is, is more of a European lifestyle brand, and they're really wanting. We talked about potential brick, and right now they feel like the palette blends in well with the AC brand itself. So we did bring samples as well for review if you'd like to see those. But we wanted to have the opportunity to discuss that because we're kind of going in conflict with what the brand also represents.
But the brand's in downtown Knoxville.
Yeah, I get it. I was going to ask that question. Are they brand standards? We've dealt with that before. So
In fact, we dealt with that on another one of Etish's projects on the Holiday Inn.
Yeah, and most of these brand, like for the AC itself, because they're, Marriott's has a lot of eyes looking on it because it is more of an elevated upscale brand. And so they're very, I would say, critical of our design elements and how it blends in with the AC brand itself.
I didn't hear your comment, Matthew. What did you say?
Oh, I just remember with other projects, that's something that has been decided upon, whether or not the brand has said they've got to have this thing there.
And the decision with those precedents was because of the brand, we went with it?
I mean, other
That's
boards
not a
have
binding.
other boards have made other decisions, I think. So
But that's not a binding precedent.
yeah.
Understood.
No, my point is that we have to wrestle with that.
Yep. Yep.
So far, there's been mostly critique of the wood grain. Is that something that the brand requires?
So they were looking for, I would say it's not specific that they're looking for that. I think what they're, they like the complement of the wood accent coming in because we are using, I know this is probably not really inside the DRB, but interior of the building as well. There's some highlighting wood elements that the interior design has proposed. And so it's really bringing some of that design aesthetics from the inside outside as well. And so that's where that wood element, kind of wood Nichiha, came into play, was that we're trying to tie in holistically what the interior of the hotels represent as well as the outside.
And initially, it was just the top floor, but Marriott wanted us to come down, and then those accent, they wanted to go through the garage, so it's not just, like a long, dull, I guess, opening to the hotel.
Does the rooftop area have public access outside of guests?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, our goal is to have the local
So if I'm
population to come through the main entrance, go up to the roof, and it's open to the rooftop lounge.
So
bar,
what's my
restaurant.
experience if I'm walking past and looking for your rooftop and I'm not a guest at the hotel? What's my experience going to be?
Sir, could we have you come up to the microphone just for the record?
Well, the experience, you go through the pedestrian entrance and through
Walnut Street.
Off Walnut. There'll be an entrance right there through the vestibule. You'll take the elevators to the rooftop. As soon as you walk out, to the right is the AC lounge and kitchen. And then on the left side would be meeting space, about 2,500 square feet for meetings as well. So.
There's also going to be a valet and host stand at this level as well. So it's part of the reason having that. I know there's some concern about having that connectivity along Locust, and we had some security kind of concerns in terms of guests as well. If we're starting to mix some of that, public realm access off Locust, then this is going to have a lot of the valet, the security, and things would be facing Walnut Street.
So the valet basically be manned 24-hour.
Yes,
So if you
that's,
wandered in looking for the rooftop, there'd be someone there to say,
that's correct.
go this way. I do see some visual similarities to the Marriott AC in Condado Beach in San Juan. We were down there recently, and it has some of this same sort of look, so I can see the influence the brand is having on what you're doing, cladding-wise.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion on, and I brought this up last time, I'm sure you'll do it, but you're going to have to mitigate that western exposure on that lobby or the rooftop bar. It's going to really, what'd I say? Sun. What'd I say? Did I say sun? Yeah, okay. Yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
you're going to get a
Correct.
strong western sunset on that side.
And I think that's why we're kind of excited about that rooftop being in that direction as well. It's
Right.
because you're going to have kind of that evening sun and then look out.
Yeah.
Look
Yeah,
out
when the
towards
weather's nice, it'll be perfect.
I'm sorry if I missed it. Is there a rendering of what the path from the public entry is back to the main part of the hotel? That kind of sidewalk area to the bottom there? Yeah.
So we do, but they're not included in this. So the interior design interior designer had actually started working on how that kind of knowing pedestrian drive, but the vehicular drive would be working. And it's got some wood elements. We've worked with Marriott in terms of just like how specialty lighting is going to be. So our goal isn't that this is just like you're driving in and it's a surface lot, right? It's going to be kind of this elevated kind of experience where you come in. If you look at that as you're driving straight in, there's a kind of that niche. We're kind of an Instagram wall. They've designed this this wood look material, and so we're definitely taking advantage of not just having this as like a surface lot per se. There's going to be ceiling lights. It's not an exposed structure below that. There's going to be a soffitted ceiling coming down below the deck. There's going to be specialty lighting, potentially pavers, kind of marking the pedestrian path as well, and different types of materials are going to be applied to the exterior of the building or kind of the exterior walls as well.
I think that pedestrian experience for this lot and this use is really sticky, and I'm not sure that you're going to redesign the whole thing to make it fit the standard. So I think those elements that make it more inviting and feel safe and feel upscale represented to this board will make us feel more comfortable about approving
So
it.
providing some more imagery, kind of enhancing that.
Right. So
absolutely.
especially I think the pedestrian experience along the street and then how inviting it looks to the public to go along that
Sure.
bottom sidewalk. Because, in a black and white drawing like this, it does look like
Absolutely.
it's surface.
Yeah, it is a little deceiving with just black and white.
I agree, and I'll make two comments. One is I'm not nuts about how our 3 downtown hotels already use. We have parking on the street that they can use for valet. So this tries to solve that problem because on this street you don't.
And I think our goal was to avoid having car stacking backing up on Walnut and then subsequently in front of the Daylight Building or in front of the parking garage entrances as well, and having more of that stacking happening underneath the building where valet can come and move the cars.
Yeah, and I think on that same note, considering that there might be a hotel function along that front glass wall, so there's sort of a guaranteed life on the street, even if it's baggage or something, I don't know what, but so that it doesn't just constantly look like it's a for lease space.
That's a good point, because the WeWork spaces, they're going to be gone at 5, if they're even there. That seems to be the kind of bag of tricks we keep getting with projects. Is it's not a retail space, it's a work space, and that's counted as retail or
An
office.
employee break room there instead, like swapping them?
So I think that'd be a concern of Marriott's, because then they're like you're approaching and then the first thing you're seeing visibility wise an employee break room. So switching that to Walnut, they're probably not going to be a big fan of that.
But if it's a hospitality use, like
Sure,
valet or
We can definitely take a look
something
at that.
like that.
And we have also, if we wanted to flip through that ground floor plan, we've also taken a look at opportunities to potentially expand that area as well. And so that would give us some ability to grow that potentially as well, and not just have it kind of move that back closer to the stairwell. So we have been evaluating that as well. The other thing, if there is I'm not sure, if one of the concerns regarding the design review board is also, that access being off the kind of that side niche and not directly off Walnut. The other, we've been thinking about all these kind of comments over the last few days, and one of the things that we talked about internally is, there is a requirement that we have to be 0 to 5 feet within the property line, right? But if we're able to push that back, then what we could do, if we push that kind of that front facade of that office retail, push it back 5 feet, then we would be able to get kind of a level kind of sidewalk adjacent to that, and then have an entrance that would be directly off of facing Walnut too, if that was acceptable.
I think that would be a huge improvement, and I think that 395 square feet would be very affordable to a lot of our local businesses and as retail.
Okay.
And I wouldn't give it up to WeWork or something like that. I really think at $28 a square foot, that's less than $1,000 a month.
So you could recess that storefront on the retail space. Wouldn't even necessarily have to recess the whole frontage of it, just to get your leveled walk in a doorway.
The doorway
faces the street. Is there some engineering requirement that keeps that car opening at 26 feet, that it couldn't go down to 20?
So that is one thing we've been taking a look at. One of the concerns and one of the things that we've talked to city engineering about was, one was the opening width. They're open to reduce that. Our only concern with that is, another comment that we've received is potentially the ability for, how are pedestrians going to be, what prevents cars from just kind of flying through that, and the crossing of the interaction of the pedestrian guests. So what we thought about is, if we could maintain that opening right now, then what we have kind of worked out is potentially putting an exit, kind of just an exit gate on the way out. But with that, we would need that additional width in order to get the mechanisms in place. And so we would put an island that's basically right in the middle of that drive aisle, and that would just be an exit-only kind of access gate. But the island would also prohibit cars from, coming around that gate on the open side as well. So if we can maintain that opening, then we'd be able to kind of accommodate those features to address some of the pedestrian concern as well.
Any other comments?
I just had, back to my comment about the material, I feel like I said that, and then you said, well, that's not what the brand wants, and we just shrugged it off. Are those comments not being considered as a possible change to the material palette? Is it just no, we're not going to do it? Is that the response?
I mean, I don't think I was trying to approach it that way.
No, I don't think you were. I'm just
that
thinking,
wasn't my intention.
So there's been hint of okay, you want the contrast, you want the warmth to play to the interior materiality, just delete the grain, the wood grain.
Okay, we can definitely take that back to Marriott and see what the opportunities are.
And that's what we said during the workshop, and that's, like I'm saying, there's not a optimal resolution, because there's so much going on, you're dealing with so many other things, but it's if that was to try to be different in contrast but still tie in with your materiality and the adjacency, it would be much more subtle and refined and fit into the context if it wasn't, it just is the grain about that material that I think is just so odd. And if we can get that, then maybe the metal panel is okay, but metal panel just seems like an odd choice for downtown as well.
So in response to the metal panel, I know one of the concerns was what it looked like for reflectivity. So we've definitely been evaluating the type of metal panel, the color. We've actually taken it outside in the sunlight to see what the reflectivity is going to be. So we understand the concerns about what that could present to the neighboring building. We're taking that under advisement. In terms of the wood grain, we hear your concerns. I think we've just got to. It's a balancing act, right? We've got to want to make sure that we're doing everything that the DRB would like us to do, but then I also have to make sure that the brand's happy with it, right? So we'll go back to them again. We did present earlier that they did not like the metal the wood grain Nichiha previously, so we did present that to them.
We've approved Nichiha wood grain panel. We just did it. It's just as an accent. Well, so don't get me wrong, we don't hate the material. It's just, it was as an accent material, so it was it was a subservient to the main. This is the main material, I think, is what the approval of this project would be, that people can clad 90% or 60% of their building in this.
But it's not really the full. It's just, I know it looks.
Well, the
it's
front
majority of
facade, the
front
main
facade,
presence,
right,
I
right.
think.
I mean, if it was reduced down, would that be acceptable? Like 50% or?
Yeah, and that, to earlier comments, I'm not trying to design it for you. I'm just trying to say that's my gut reaction, is that that material is not palatable for the rest of its context.
I think also on the locust side, it's going to be really awkward in 10 or 15 years when the rest of that street is activated and there's basically the back of a building facing the front of all the new buildings and development that will happen in those parking lots and other places. So,
Last question about the metal panel. I'm going to put you on the spot, Mike. What is the percentage that they're allowed to have a metal panel as a facade material as it reads in the zoning code?
There's two different, well, basically it says, let me just go to the section so I can read it to you. It's not decay. All right. So it says in the DK district, the materials that are, I say prohibited, but they're not, they're allowed only 25% of the facade. It's plain concrete, CMU, aluminum, steel, or other metal sidings. This restriction does not include metal architectural wall panels, exposed aggregate concrete wall panels, T111 composite plywood siding, plastic, vinyl, and EFIS. So it's that metal siding one that's hard to define exactly what that means. So it doesn't allow aluminum, steel, or other metal siding, but that does not include architectural metal wall panels.
You said 25%?
That 25%, so that restriction, the materials that I listed can be up to 25%. Everything else can be 100%.
So in regards to, we'd love to hear more feedback about Locust in terms of, because I understand your point of view for activation. Right now with unfortunately that transformer room, we're at kind of that where it has to be, just because if we try to slide it up further up towards the parking lot side, we're not going to have the ceiling height that KEB is requiring, and the flattest portion of the side is actually adjacent to Langley, so we do want to try to maintain that as an entrance. But in terms of opportunities that the board may be looking at, if there was an opportunity to potentially provide some type of amenity there in the back for the public, is that something that would be amendable? Like instead of, we tried to move some type of public function for the hotel to there, but the other thing is it wouldn't necessarily just have, it might, maybe there's an opportunity to think about what else that could be utilized for, some type of amenity space. Because with the grading challenges, it wouldn't necessarily, they'd be able to access it from the alleyway side. It wouldn't necessarily be directly from, we could recess the building potentially and have some type of a function there, if that would be.
Like, could the hotel gym be there? Something that has activity, or even when people aren't in a gym, you see the equipment and it looks like there's activity to it. Just looking like you were sort of working with, can we activate that space in some manner?
The accessible entry to the employee break room is from the inside.
Correct.
Right? So is there anything preventing you from making that planter plinth into like a patio with stairs coming off of it?
No, not necessarily. I know we're in the right of way and we got an approval to use the city engineer, we talked on Monday in the pre-submittal, and they were okay with the use of planners. I guess we'd have to talk to them and see if they were okay with stairs being there instead in lieu of planners.
Yeah, again, because it really is just a sticky programmatic puzzle that any gesture to activity on the street, even if it's employees having their lunch out on the patio instead of tucked inside,
Okay.
is a help, I think.
Okay. Yeah. It's a good idea.
Are there any other comments, or should we make a motion?
I think they've got lots of things to consider and seem open to many of these adjustments. And plus, we've got that step back that's got to be dealt with anyway.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I believe the motion to postpone as recommended by staff is the appropriate one. And I'm excited to see what you bring back next month.
Thank you.
Your draftsmen are going to be busy.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Perry to accept the staff recommendation to postpone, and there's a second from Cameron. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Use a pencil, looks like this.
You and I are draftsmen. You and I know what draftsmen.
It's computer.
We were draftsmen. We were drafts boys.
Draftsmen.
Oh, I know.
No, that, I think that's true.
Oh, they're right here. I got them right here.
Good evening. Welcome to the 2023 Mayor's Council on Disability Issues Mayoral Forum. Please remember to silence your cell phones and remain quiet for the duration of the event. You are welcome to enter and leave as you need, and restrooms are just outside this door to the left. We will be allotting 60 seconds per candidate to introduce themselves, and we will be giving each candidate 90 seconds to answer each of the questions. Questions will be answered in round robin style. In order to keep everything running smoothly, once each candidate reaches 60 seconds, a yellow card will be raised to alert them to the time. And at 90 seconds, a red card will be raised. For introductions, tonight we have mayoral candidates Constance Every, and you have 60 seconds if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Oh, okay, introduction starts now. All right. Yes, thank you so much, Disability Office, for having us all here tonight. Disability is a major concern when you look around the city of Knoxville. There's a lot of infrastructure that is not sidewalk friendly, particularly for our wheelchair members that are motorized. Some of the accessibility of the doorways are not actually handicap accessible doors, whether they are actually not automatic or wide enough. And then of course, when I looked at some of the questions, yes, the things like the playgrounds and some of the other public accessibility resources that should be readily available for anyone to use is not actually proficient. And more importantly, compliances. We have factors around compliances that we're not seeing enforced, and more importantly, we're not seeing real stride toward that from the current administration to actually check those appliances. Title VI office is a necessity. It covers a lot of different things, but its main primary force is to be a watchdog to ensure things like the enforcement of the ADA appliances and other codes. And so with that being said, I'm looking forward to further having this conversation with you all tonight. Disability is a personal thing for my own self. I am a disabled combat veteran, 100%. I served the country in Afghanistan 2 tours. So I fully understand the indivisibility or the invisibility of scars that people may not see due to mental health and other issues. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Next up, we have R.C. Lawhorn, and I'd also like to remind all the candidates that we do have interpreters, and so as slowly as you can speak. I know we only gave you 60 seconds, but.
My name's R.C. Lawhorn. I'm a general contractor. I have a degree in electronic engineering. I happen to work for Genova Hospitals in their behavioral health, mental health, and I currently work for the state of Tennessee, converting a lot of their cabins and stuff for wheelchair accessibility, things like that. So I have a lot of knowledge in this area as far as the requirements and all that of it. I have a good understanding of what we can do to better help people with the electronics part of it. So I'm kind of looking forward to tonight's conversation as it goes forward and try to come up with some good ideas that's going to benefit the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Jeff Tallman.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Tallman, and I'm a civic-minded person in the community.
If you could use your microphone.
Microphone, okay. I live in the 4th and Gill neighborhood. I've been a business leader and civic leader in Knoxville for the past 30-plus years. Love our city, and appreciate you holding this forum. I was just became aware of it about 15 minutes ago, so I hustled down here. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. It's interesting. My mother taught special needs and gifted kids for her entire professional career. So I've been keenly aware of the opportunities to help all of our citizens achieve their maximum potential. My campaign co-chair is Becky Massey, who for a decade served as Sertoma Center Executive Director. So this is a critical discussion. It's interesting as we expect people to live longer. I think we're going to be collectively redefining what disability means in terms of how we deal with our physical frailty, but still have plenty of capacity to contribute to our world. So thank you for hosting.